In this video, I show you how to set up your machine for development with BBj. So we're going to install Java, Eclipse, and BBj itself so that you're ready to go for BBj development. I start by opening my browser. I go to basis.com and start off from the products from the download page. Downloads, and we start with BBj BBX product suite download. So I'm using the 2103. Typically you will see the most recent version here in this list, and very often you will see a release candidate version here, which is the next upcoming version that we put out for your testing if you want to have an early preview. But it's typically okay to work with the last version of BBj. And in this case, I'm going with the BBj Barista and Demos choice, and I fill in my data here, and I agree to the license terms and accept the rules and start downloading it. So that's step one. You see the download is coming, and while this download is running, I go to the Eclipse plugins page that is linked right here. And so basically this page is what you will want to refer to also when you want to follow the steps that I was just doing. It was just easier for me to reach it over the download page and start the download of BBj itself right away. But here you see step one would be Java. So the current Java 11 that we need for BBj 21 is Adoptium. The link to the page is here. So I open this in a new tab and make sure to go for the time being with OpenJDK 11 and always choose the hotspot compiler. And here this already proposes for my Windows machine the right version. You can also go to other platforms here, which leaves you more choices like when you need Linux or like Mac or other environments. But I'm good with the Windows 64-bit installer, and I'm choosing for me the MSI package for the JDK. Okay, going back here, also we want to install the Eclipse IDE itself. So going here to the link which is there, which is currently the 2103 release. And what I typically do is, on a normal developer for BBj, I go with the IDE for Java developers. If you're planning on doing web development and need CSS editors and stuff, even the Enterprise Java might be for you. It's coming with a lot more pre-installed, but for a typical BBj installer, the IDE for Java developers would be okay. I'm also choosing here the Windows build for my machine. You may need Mac or others for your environment. So hit download, and now everything is coming to our disk. We can close these two tabs. I leave this page open because we need it a little later to install the plugins. And now we're turning to our downloads folder. So I start with the OpenJDK MSI that I just downloaded. I accept the license terms. And you can just go with the defaults. If you are new to this, leaving the defaults is fine. That's the Java part. So now let's go for a BBj install. So here also going with the defaults in the beginning is okay. 2103, accept the license agreement. Where do you want to install? So currently we propose to install on your root drive to the BBX folder. I leave it like that so that later on when we do additional videos, everything is also to the default. You may have other requirements for your environment, so you can set a directory name here. Go ahead. Here we verify that we are using the OpenJDK that we just download and installed. And I also leave the defaults here, which gives me everything a beginner would need except for the add-on software. So now we wait for this installer to finish. Now also here on a Windows machine, I typically run with standard privileges, so leave this to the default. Here it would be about licensing. So if you have received a license for your development machine, go here to retrieve a license and hit next. If you want to point your machine to an existing license manager in your corporate environment, then this would be the option for you. And install a license would be the option when you received a license file, not just a serial number and an activation key. I do retrieve a license. This is pre-filled for already on my machine, so if it's empty for you, just make sure to fill it in. So on this screen you see the serial number and the authentication number to be filled in. If you have received these two, just fill them in here in the two fields which I'm blurring. If you didn't receive a license yet, just contact your sales rep or contact us and we will give you a developer license for your machine. You can also request an evaluation license, which will kind of immediately just make you continue, and you can work with a license 5 user 5 days to get started. This is a notebook computer, means this host ID contains certain information about your hardware to link the license to. If you check this, then it will not include Wi-Fi and other network components, so that when you are disconnected sitting in a plane, the license will still recognize the computer. So typically this is good to be checked for a notebook computer. Hit next, and then we register and install the license automatically. This is also okay for most environments. If you're on an offline computer not connected to the internet, this would be the only situation where you need one of the other options. Go ahead and do that. Now you see that everything went fine. Now the license manager is the daemon that serves the license to the BBj. So we want to run on a Windows machine this thing as a Windows service. So I just hit next. Then I want to start the service. Then for a developer machine, it's also okay to just automatically start the BBj services, which is the kind of application server of BBj in the foreground after user login. On a production machine, you would probably go for Windows service, set up a dedicated account, give it a password, and then have the BBj daemon, the service itself, run as a service. I go with automatically after user login and hit again next to get it started. And you see here the coffee cup appearing in my taskbar, which indicates that everything went well and the service has been started. So this is about BBj, and we can verify if BBj has been installed properly by just typing BBj to the command line. And so you see here BBj is an app installed on my machine, and it's bringing up the console. We see the temporary serial number that has been handed by requesting the temporary license. And if you see this console window, then its BBj has been installed nicely and fine. So hitting buy closes this window again. And now we can turn to the Eclipse IDE. So going again to my downloads folder, you see I have here a zip archive from the Eclipse download, and this is how Eclipse typically ships their installation. So what I typically do is I just open the zip, which is conveniently done with a double click on Windows. Then I go into the zip folder, make this a little larger, go here, right click and copy the Eclipse folder, and then just go to C and paste it into the root drive so that I have Eclipse directly on my development machine. You see I don't have a very busy machine here. This is just prepared for this video. You may have your different idea on how to organize your file system, but I'm doing this also for the sake of simplicity. So now that this is complete, we can go into the Eclipse folder, and you see Eclipse exe, which is fine. One thing you may need later is you see there's an Eclipse ini, and this can be edited And this is the place where you would, for instance, if told, if you may run out of memory with your Eclipse, you may need to adjust this XMX setting here. It's typically coming with a 2 gigabytes XMX. XMX is the maximum memory that Java will allocate. So we leave it with the default, but if you're running into any issues in your Eclipse, this might be at a place where you want to go and maybe double this to 4 gigabytes. Of course, don't make it bigger than what you have memory in your machine. So now we can start Eclipse from this directory. And it's asking me for a workspace. I'm also putting my workspace on the C drive directly for the sake of this video, so that I can reach it directly. You may also want to organize your workspace wherever you want it. What is a workspace? A workspace is basically a folder in which Eclipse kind of puts everything for a certain work environment. So for instance, if you work with a workspace today and you have 2 projects in it and you arrange your windows, and tomorrow you say, oh, I'm working on an entirely different project, then you can use a different workspace and then come back to that one later, and it will then still have everything in place as it was before. So workspaces are handy if you switch environments. So I have several workspaces. I do customer projects, and sometimes I have plugin development for the BBj plugins, which we will also probably cover in one of the videos. And so I have workspaces for each of these task-oriented environments that I need during my day and my week. So here, for the sake of this video, I leave it with C Eclipse workspace, and Eclipse continues to start. And here we go with an empty Eclipse screen. So what we need to do now is we need to install the basis BBj plugins for the BBj development inside Eclipse. So I close this little welcome window here, and I also don't want to donate this time. And now what we need to do is we need to go back to that basis Eclipse plugins page, because now we have successfully done step number 3. So we did 1, 2, and 3, Java, BBj, and Eclipse. And now we need to turn to the basis plugins. So you see here that further down the line, there is also a distinction between the plugins for the release version. This is what we downloaded for that machine, 2103 release. If we would have used the release candidate, we could have equally also gone ahead and used the release candidate plugins version, so that we can also preview these a few days before the release comes out, and maybe give feedback or test if maybe the enhancement request we have filed is already addressed and all these things. But I will install here the release version of the plugins. And in current BBj from 21 on, there's only one download URL, which combines all the potential things you may want to install for BBj. So the code editor plugin, the enterprise manager, and the BBj utils, which come with certain utilities that you may like later on down the road. So I just do the following. This is how I typically do it. I copy the link address here by right-clicking on it and just say copy link address. Then I go back to Eclipse. I say help install new software. Now here in the work with, I just paste the link that I just copied and hit enter. That's what I typically do. Then you see Eclipse is fetching information and now offers me the various things. What I will do, so that we have a machine where everything is installed, I just go ahead and install the whole enchilada. Hit next. Then we see a summary of what's going to be installed. Hit next again, accept the license terms, and hit finish. And now Eclipse is installing software. You can see that Eclipse is working always by this little green progress bar in the status bar. There is this icon next to it, which allows you to click on, and then you see what it's doing. So now we have to wait a little. Now Eclipse asks me if I want to restart. So this is always necessary after installing or updating any of the plugins. So I hit restart now. So now we have to tell the BDT stands for Basis Development Toolkit, where to find our BBj installation. So when you see this dialog, invalid BBj installation, you just hit search. Then you say search for a BBj 21 installation, click that button. Now I go to my disk and just point it to the cbbx folder. So point it to the folder where you before installed the BBj installation itself. So now it says everything's fine. I hit finish. And now I can open the BBj perspective because this looks still a bit weird. So when you go to Window, Perspective, Open Perspective, Other, you see BDT. BDT stands, as I said earlier, for Basis Development Toolkit. Check that one, hit Open, and then you see it's still not 100% like as I like it. I want the BDT Develop Explorer on the left. If ever you messed up your screen as I just did, go here and say Reset Perspective, and then it's putting it back to the defaults as we intended it to be. So that's the right way to do. I don't know why it didn't show it nicely after a fresh install, but if it looks messed up for you, make sure to have chosen the right perspective here. The perspective switcher is up here, and then go to Window, Perspective, Reset Perspective, and then everything will be in good shape again as it was shipped or intended to be shipped.